Hello and welcome to MRCPsych on the Go Revision Essentials. My name is Dr. Alapasur and I'm a psychiatry trainee in the west of Scotland. Like many of you, I spent a lot of time commuting. This was valuable time that I could have spent revising for the MRCPsych examination. And so, I've started this podcast to help you revise on the go. Each episode breaks down one high-yield topic mapped to the syllabus. This is then followed by 5 questions to help reinforce your learning. So, grab your headphones, turn travel time into revision time, and let's get started. In the previous episodes, we focused on learning theory and how anxiety is maintained. In this episode, we move into clinical application. These are the principles that explain how behavioural treatments actually work in real clinical practice. Let us go through them one by one. Reciprocal inhibition refers to 2 emotional states that cannot fully exist at the same time. The classic example is anxiety and relaxation. They are incompatible. If a person learns to induce relaxation in the presence of something they fear, anxiety gradually reduces. Here is a clinical example. A patient has a specific phobia of dogs. First, they are taught progressive muscle relaxation. They practice until they can reliably enter a relaxed state. Next, they create a fear hierarchy. At the lowest level, they imagine a small dog at a distance. While imagining this, they actively practice relaxation. Anxiety begins to rise, but they maintain relaxation. Over repeated sessions, the anxiety response weakens. Gradually, they move up the hierarchy. Eventually, they can stand near a real dog while remaining calm. Relaxation competes with anxiety, and over time, the fear response diminishes. Remember, reciprocal inhibition replaces anxiety with an incompatible response. Let's move on to habituation. Habituation refers to the natural reduction in anxiety that occurs after repeated exposure to a feared situation. The key is that the person remains in the situation. They do not escape. They do not rely on safety behaviours. Here is a clinical example. A patient with panic disorder fears supermarkets. They enter a supermarket and remain there. Anxiety rises rapidly. They stay. They do not leave. After several minutes, the anxiety begins to fall. It falls naturally. They repeat this exposure over several weeks. Each time, the peak anxiety becomes lower and the anxiety reduces more quickly. This happens because the nervous system adapts. The reduction occurs without avoidance. Remember, habituation is the natural decline in anxiety after repeated exposure, without escape or avoidance. Now, let's move on to chaining. Chaining is used to teach complex behaviours. A complex task is broken down into smaller, manageable steps. Each step is learned in sequence, and each step becomes a cue for the next. For example, a patient is learning to prepare a simple meal independently. The task is divided into steps. First, wash hands. Second, collect the ingredients. Third, chop the vegetables. Fourth, cook the food. Fifth, serve the meal. Each step is taught individually. Once one step is mastered, the next is added. Over time, the patient performs the full sequence smoothly and independently. Forward chaining begins with the first step. Backward chaining begins with the final step and works backwards. Chaining is commonly used in rehabilitation and skills training. Remember, chaining links smaller behaviours together to build a complex behaviour. Now, let's look at shaping. Shaping reinforces gradual progress towards a target behaviour. The final behaviour is not expected at the beginning. Instead, small improvements are reinforced and expectations increase over time. For example, a patient with severe depression is largely inactive. The target behaviour is attending a weekly social group. Initially, the patient simply gets dressed and sits in the living room. This is reinforced. Next, they walk to the end of the driveway. That is reinforced. Later, they enter the building but leave quickly. This is further reinforced. Eventually, they remain for the full session. Each step is a closer approximation to the final goal. Gradually, behaviour moves closer to the desired outcome. Remember, shaping reinforces successive approximations towards a goal. Lastly, let's explore cueing. Cueing involves prompts that initiate behaviour. These prompts can be verbal, visual, or environmental. For example, an alarm may prompt medication adherence. A checklist may prompt task completion. Over time, these cues are gradually faded, encouraging independent behaviour. Remember, cueing introduces prompts and then gradually removes them. We will now move on to 5 exam-style questions. After each one, I will pause for 10 seconds so you can think it through before hearing the answer. Question 1. A therapy technique pairs relaxation training with gradual exposure to a feared stimulus. Which behavioural principle does this illustrate? The answer is reciprocal inhibition. Question 2. A patient remains in a feared situation without leaving. Over repeated exposures, their peak anxiety reduces. Which process best explains this reduction? The answer is habituation. Question 3. A complex self-care routine is taught by breaking it down into smaller steps. Each step is learned in sequence, and each step acts as a cue for the next. What behavioural technique is being used? The answer is chaining. Question 4. A socially withdrawn patient is reinforced for making brief eye contact. Later, longer conversations are reinforced. Which behavioural principle does this describe? The answer is shaping. And finally, question 5. A patient uses a daily alarm to prompt medication adherence. Over time, the alarm is gradually removed once the behaviour becomes routine. Which behavioural principle is being applied? The answer is cueing with gradual fading of prompts. If you paused and genuinely thought through each question, that is exactly how to prepare effectively for this exam. Well done. Let's summarise what we have learnt today. Reciprocal inhibition replaces anxiety with an incompatible response. Habituation reduces anxiety through repeated exposure without escape. Chaining builds complex behaviour step by step. Shaping reinforces gradual improvement towards a goal. Cueing uses prompts to initiate behaviour and then gradually fades them. Thank you very much for listening to this episode of MRCPsych on the Go Revision Essentials. I hope this episode helped to move your revision forward. If you have any questions or just want to continue the discussion, you can find me on LinkedIn at MRCPsych on the Go, spelled MRCPysch on the go. This podcast is about making revision accessible. If you found it useful, liking and sharing it with others helps the goal more than anything else. That's it for today. I'm Dr. Alap Azurlikar, and as always, keep revising on the go.